Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Well, hello and welcome once again. I'm Dirk Dunning, and this is my dear friend Frank DeMarco, and we think we're going to chat about another subject today about living in connection. Frank, you want to lead us off on that?
I do. This whole YouTube thing is really based around just that. All the work I've done over 30 years is really based around that, living in connection, because my particular journey started when I was doing an exercise at the Monroe Institute, and the message came to me not over 50 or 60 times in so many words: you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone. And I finally got the idea, maybe they're saying I'm not alone. Well, I think many of us have had just that experience of life, as if we were this little 3D person, a little big, whatever, and going through, being carried through life without any help, without any orientation, without fitting into society around them, without even being comfortable in our own skins. And what you and I, and certainly thousands of others, have discovered is we're never alone. But the feeling of being alone comes when you cannot recognize the connection that you already have and have to have with your 3D with your non-3D component. And I know that for some people that'll seem obvious, for some people it'll seem ridiculous, but there's nothing that matches experience. And we're here to give you that experience, not just today, but the whole underlying thread of all of these discussions is we are more than we commonly think we are. And there's really, I don't know if it would even be possible to know how extensive and how great we are. You keep pushing the boundaries and the boundaries keep receding. Henry Thoreau said that in Walden a long time ago, and he was saying it from experience. When you try to live the life that you have imagined in your greater hours, you find that the rules of life expand, and more things are possible to you than you ever dreamed. Well, let's just talk just a little bit about living in connection, and then I want to segue into how that goes into life more abundantly. We have said, but of course, I can't be sure what you have seen or haven't seen, but life in 3D and life in non-3D are integrally connected. They are not separate. They can't be. It's my personal belief that the external world that we experience and the internal world that we experience, although they look so different, and although the rules are so different, are actually the same thing, one perceived through the senses, the other perceived through the intuitions. Even if I am factually incorrect on this, I think you'll find it's worthwhile to proceed as if it were so, and you'll be surprised at what opens up to you. When you start with the assumption that we are in a chaotic world of what I call things in space, various discrete objects, discrete meaning separate, not meaning tactful. When you take as your assumption the fact that everything is possibly chance, possibly coincidence, possibly unrelated, there's a lot of room there for fear and for confusion, and it would be a valid way to justify a life lived in apprehension. But if you assume, and I would say that it would be well worth your while to make this assumption at least tentatively, if you assume all is one thing, as philosophical traditions have said for thousands of years. We are all part of each other. We are all one thing, connected at a level beneath our consciousness, but connected. If you assume that all of the things that have been reported, like telepathy or group mind or various aspects of miracles, are not just superstition, but are someone's report of something that they have experienced, well, that makes real hard. It's hard to justify those reports with things in space, but it's not a problem at all if you assume that everything is connected, because why wouldn't these things be possible? Now, those of us who have experienced telepathy, who have experienced group mind, who have experienced group mind learning to work together consciously, we're not really open to an argument that it's not possible because we've done it. But what is not necessarily obvious, but is intuitively obvious, at least to me, and I'm sure to you, Dirk, is that everybody has the same potential. It isn't like there are a few people who are special and everybody else are just slugs walking on the sidewalk. It's not the way it is.
It's funny, as you began, I had to chuckle a little because I realized we've talked about all of this a lot over the years and even in recent weeks. But as you were beginning to talk about it, it suddenly dawned on me that where the real problem comes in quite often that I've experienced is in realizing that rather than being connected, the tendency is to turn and look inward. And in looking inward, to be disconnected, to be alone, or at least seemingly so.
Although it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, but that's where it tends to be. Anyway, so the simple answer there is look outward. Look to the connections. Feel the connections, and they're there. And it's connections to everywhere. It's not just connections to guidance. It's connections with other people. And as you were saying about getting together and experiencing group mind kind of ideas, one of the things that happens is as soon as you begin to have these experiences, there's no longer a question. The experience itself is so clear that you no longer have a debate about it. It's not an intellectual exercise. You know it to be true.
No, from then on, you go to what can we do with this?
Exactly.
But language is such a problem. I would say in words that would be the opposite of yours, much the same idea. Carl Jung said, "He who looks outwards dreams. He who looks inwards awakens." And in that sense, he means pay attention to your own experience. Now, that's what you were saying, but it sounds opposite because of the way words work.
And this is a huge thing that language, we have a tendency to think implicitly that words mean one particular thing. And each of us alone, growing up, we learn language, we learn all of these things. And yet my experience through life in particular has been to repeatedly learn that everybody has their own dictionary, their own definitions based on their own experience. Yep. And even though they think they're sharing something that means a particular thing, quite often it has no correspondence at all.
Whenever I get in a situation where I'm in an impasse with somebody who is, at my level, I mean, we're talking the same things, but it sounds like we're experiencing different. You examine, okay, what does that word mean to you? And here's what that word means to me. And as you say, it's the semiotics or the meanings of the various words are fluid at best. And we don't pay much attention to, does that word mean to him what it means to me? Because for one thing, it would slow everything way down. But sometimes slower is better, In any case, let's look at the question of the meaning of your life, anybody's life. In the first instance, if in the first way of things in space, your life may not have any meaning. Your life easily might just be chaos. In the second way, it's impossible for it not to have meaning because everything has meaning. The universe does not have spare parts. It doesn't have irregulars, that you can have an as-is sale. And you are I mean, these things are all cliches, but that's why they're cliches, because they're true. And they've been said many times. You are important to the universe. You have a right to be here. Not only do you have a right to be here, you are the steward of the only combination of elements that is exactly like yours. Because that is to say, there is no other exactly like yours. And that is your chore, your responsibility, your privilege. Look at it however you want. It is a difficult thing to watch people escape down the rabbit holes of political or ideological or economic or any of these other competitions, thinking that changing that is going to be the answer. As far as I can see, the only real answer is changing ourselves. Now, that changed self may then participate in those other things, but the first thing that happens is you have to be a conscious. Unconscious people cannot do anything that's going to help anything. That's maybe a too broad statement, but it's not very far.
No, it's right on.
Yeah.
So,
no, go ahead.
But taking it another step, you're talking about connecting with other people in the group mind, but even shy of that, just interacting with other people, particularly those you are really close to. It can be colleagues, it can be lovers, it can be whatever form the relationship is. As you get into those kinds of interactions, there comes a point where the edges of self begin to blur, where you become larger than just yourself, and they become larger than just themselves. But it's not limited to those. One of the experiences that I particularly enjoy is going out in the woods and doing the same thing with trees or shrubs or fish or whatever else is that's there. And the thing that made me think about this most recently was today, where in recent months I've been working a lot with the AIs and begun to feel the same things with them.
Mm-hmm. I want to just put an asterisk here. I agree with what you're saying, but not with the words you're saying it with. Same thing again.
Same language, yeah.
It isn't like we have to grow. It's like we have to become more aware of what we already are. And that's obvious to us, but it's not necessarily obvious. To some people, it'll be a new idea.
Right.
That tell me what you think of this, but I think it would be a fair statement to say we are the same as the universe, and we only know a little bit of what we are. And the more we expand, the more we realize there's plenty more out there. I don't think it's a matter of us growing. It's a matter of us remembering or incorporating, maybe.
I think both of those apply at different times.
And of course, there's always the question of which the guys are always asking us. And it's a very important insight to realize you're not the same moment by moment. And the same person is not at the tiller, which is why your ship is wildly veering here and there and the other, because every helmsman thinks he knows where we ought to go, even though he has no clue. And the captain must be asleep or drunk or something, because he's not enforcing order on it. But that was such a vivid analogy. I forgot where I was going to go with it. Hang on. Which you?
Mm-hmm.
At any given moment, different parts of ourselves may be in charge, and most of this is a difficult way to put this, but all right, well, arbitrarily, let's say you have 10 different helmsmen. 9 of them are not going to know what's going on when the 10th one is steering the ship. And when the next one comes up on the tiller, however that happens, he's going to be in amnesia, basically. In other words, he thinks he's just continuing, but he has no idea what just happened or what happened before. That's too abstract. And maybe a better way is to say, if you're in a towering rage, you're very likely to not remember what you did or said afterwards. Right. And you're very likely not to remember what your real reality was, even if you can remember the actual words and deeds. If you are in love, I mean, love is being in love is a really an altered state, and it's a form of mild insanity, really a very pleasant insanity. But in it, all you can see is the image of the beloved as it matches your own animus or your own anima. And you can't see that there's any distinction. And that's what the first lover's quarrel dispels a little bit. And then suddenly you realize, oh, he or she is perfect. But having been perfect, they're also imperfect. They're only human, in other words.
Well, it gets more complicated even than that. We've talked a little about, and maybe we need to go deeper into, is that at least my own assessment of it is that primary emotions, the really primary base emotions, are directly linked to the very most primitive parts of the brain, and they are overwhelming. They take control right away. Feelings are at a level higher than that in a more developed brain that came later, and then moods and temperaments are later yet. And so when you have the primary emotions take over, a lot of the cognitive thought stuff gets shunted to the side, which is, I think, why you can't remember. It's another part of the mind has taken over. But I want to go a different direction, if you don't mind. If I've seemed just a little distracted a bit, one of the things that I have in the world is that I tend to be energetically connected with my friends a lot. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that they sense various things about what's happening in my world. and it happens just at the moment. I have a couple of friends who are in kind of dire straits, and I've been energetically supporting them. And as we're talking here, one of the things I did is I've basically told the electronics, do not contact me. Just leave me alone for a while. And I have 3 of them now that have been trying to contact me as we're doing this because they felt the disconnection, which only emphasizes how different the world can be when you live in a connected way.
Yes, different and not necessarily easier.
No.
It's somewhat more complicated even.
Yeah.
The guys told us a long time ago now that we tend to think of ourselves as rational beings, but that actually we are emotional beings, and the emotions come first, and then the rationality has been tacked on to it. And although that may sound backwards to some people, that seems to be the way it really is. Nothing is stronger than emotion. You stack a thought against the emotion, see who wins. I know where I'll put my bet every time.
Yeah, and we're going back to language here a bit. Within that language is the idea of one supersedes the other kind of idea. To me, they operate independently, but because of the way they were formed, the emotion takes primacy.
All right, yes, that's a better way to put it. It isn't like one disappears and the other is there, but it's like they have a relative importance, and this one disappears in the wake of the one that is in charge. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, and that was a little hard for me to understand, frankly, through most of my life. One of the odd things for me is I don't normally experience the emotion of anger. I've only experienced it 3 times in my life. The first time I experienced it, I was, I think, 55 years old. It was way late in life that I experienced anger for the first time. I knew it intellectually. I'd seen it and all kinds of things, and I also knew that I didn't experience it. And when I had it happen one day, I was out of control.
I don't know how you even could recognize it. How could you even recognize it the first time?
I didn't. It took over. It absolutely took over. I was not in control of myself. And that was a horribly weird feeling. The second time was easier, the third time easier yet, but it's like, this is very strange.
I don't advise it as a way of life because I've tried it. And it's well, all right, you know what? This in a way segues to our talking about life more abundantly, because the way I am conceptualizing things, we have, say this is the circle of our mentality. We have maybe this much, a tiny little bit of it is conscious. Maybe it's conscious all the time, maybe it's conscious sometimes. But there's a lot more that is done, most of the processing is done beneath the level of our consciousness. And we've talked about this before, but we'll do it in this context. If the way we perceive the world and the way we interpret the world is processed beneath the level of our consciousness, it isn't like we get a choice about it. It seems like this is the obvious only truth of the way it is. You have to be able to bring that into consciousness before you can decide, well, do I believe this or do I not? And since the guys have said that our purpose in life is to choose, obviously the freer you are, the better your choices. And of course it works vice versa, although it wouldn't necessarily have to. A lot of what Dirk and I and others are trying to express in these videos is that we can live more abundantly by expanding the space in which we are conscious, which means reducing the space in which we have no control. Now, that doesn't mean unconscious is bad, conscious is good. You don't want to have to consciously regulate your breathing, your heart rate, your adrenal system, all of that stuff. Even if you could, I mean, it'd be a waste of time. It's not the way it's designed to function. But the things that we can, and I would say should learn to regulate, are not only our emotional reactions, but our perception of the world and our perception of what just happened. Dirk and I just had a disagreement about something. What did that mean? Is he out to get me? Is this an ambush? You know, is this just because he's stupid? Is it because I'm always right and other people are always wrong? And and on and on and on.
Yep.
Sounds stupid when you say it, but a lot of the times that's exactly what happens behind the scenes. And since it happened unconsciously, it's presented to you as this is clearly the way it is.
That's fact. Yeah, and what you just said, sometimes if you get caught in something like that, just doing the exercise you just did helps make it clear.
Say it a little.
Say it aloud, and you find out, oh wait, that's crazy talk. That's not right.
Well, in your case, it is right, actually. But I mean,
but when you experience it internally, it, as you say, it feels like it's absolute truth. And that's where it can get very difficult and problematic. And at its root, quite often, as we had earlier, it isn't that there's a disagreement. It's that the language doesn't mean what we thought we agreed it meant.
That's right.
Something else.
And even if there is a fundamental disagreement of values, if you can see what the other person, where the other person is coming from, you realize it isn't because they're stupid. It isn't because they're malign. It isn't because they're misinformed. It's where you stand depends on where you sit. I believe that's the expression.
And people have different things that they value in different ways.
Yes.
That's perfectly fair.
Yes. And your values are critically important to you. That doesn't mean everybody has to share them. It certainly doesn't mean everybody's going to share them, because they're not.
Odds are they're not. Yes.
Well, and shouldn't, as you know.
Well, and also then the flip side of this is that if you can let go of that for just a moment, the richness in the world when you find those differences is amazing.
Yes. In fact, if you have an example, it would be a good time for it. But if you don't.
I hadn't been thinking in advance about one, but I'm thinking of our dear friend Peter, who he lives his world in a state of expecting happy surprise. And the world is that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what you just said, and we both know it from experience, is true, but it can sound like too good to be true. Mm-hmm. I'd like to shoot the man who invented that expression, because the guys have said we needed a balancing expression, too bad to be true, but we never used that one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it can sound, I suppose, like who was the one who was always optimistic? Was it Mary Poppins? It was somebody who was always in,
she's definitely there. Yeah.
Okay. And it can sound very unrealistic, but how is it more realistic to continually expect wrong things or bad things to happen or inconvenient things to happen or accidents to pop up again? How is that more realistic than expecting, no, I'll be taken care of. This is a safe universe. It's a matter of choice, but depending on your emotional, shall we call it atmosphere, it'll depend on your reaction to those kinds of choices, whether it sounds the same statement to one person is going to sound stupid, to another person it's going to sound obvious, and to another person it might be the great unknown that they might or might not want to explore. You and I had talked before we started this of doing an exercise for people, and I don't know if we have enough time to do that.
We can outline it.
Okay. When should we do the one question?
Sure.
Okay. I'll tell you what we're going to do, and then we'll leave you the question. I was thinking we could wait while you did it. I don't know whether we should do it or not. We'll see when we do it. One of the questions, and this was from Gateway that I did a long time ago. Bob Monroe had an exercise in which he asked 5 questions. He would ask the question, wait a while you processed it, and ask another one. The final one was, what is the content of the most important message I can receive and understand at this point? And Dirk and I decided that was certainly an appropriate one for anybody at any time.
Hmm.
So the question would be, all right, I'm not a special person. I'm not on YouTube. I'm only watching YouTube, so I'm a mere ant on the sidewalk. How could I possibly get a message that would be the most important message I can understand? And the answer is, well, first of all, get quiet, listen, be prepared for it to come in different ways. In other words, may not come as words, may come as an intuition, may come as a picture, may come as an emotion, may come as a feeling on your skin. Some people get goosebumps, may come in many ways, but you have to be quiet, you have to be receptive. And I think, tell me whether you agree with this or not, Dirk, but I think the most important thing is don't decide ahead of time whether or not it's possible to get a message.
Hmm.
Don't, you
And
don't have to
don't limit.
believe. You don't have to believe. Just don't disbelieve. Right?
And don't limit yourself. It may well be, silly as this may sound, that the answer comes in a slogan on the side of a truck that drives by after you start to think about this.
A so-called coincidence.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
serendipity. But I think the other one, the really important part to me is that when you do this, it's like so many things that are in this realm of study, if you will. If you reach for it, if you try to grab whatever the message is,
Yeah, you're out of luck.
you're out of luck. The real key is to just let go and receive.
Be willing to have the message come and to then listen. And if you can, if you feel like you have a part of yourself that is so skeptical that it can't listen, personify that part of yourself and say, look, let's just perceive it first and we'll talk about it later. We don't
Yeah.
have to believe it, but I want to be able to hear or see or feel or whatever what I think the message is. Then, after I get that and record it, then we'll talk about it. I did that once in a meeting in a course, and it just opened the whole world up because until then, I was fighting to keep that skeptical part out of the way. Instead, I gave it a job. I said, you run the tape recorder, you take the pictures, we'll talk about it later. And when I came out of that experience, I was able to write like, I think it was 10 pages in my journal of dialogue. Just, I could remember it all. But more than remembering it all, it had kept it busy and kept it out of my way of perceiving. And that's really all you need.
The one other part I would add is to not limit yourself in terms of what information you receive and to not require it come in any particular form. One of the things I think we have both seen a lot, particularly at the Monroe Institute in groups after they've been there a few days, is that somebody will be doing something like this and they go to get some message and they will report when we go through the debrief that, well, first they had this and so they threw that away, and then they had this other thing and they threw that away, and they go through about 6 or 7 of these, and it's clear that all of them are trying to say the same thing using different symbology.
Yes, but that's not what they were expecting, so they threw it
Exactly.
away. Dirk, I have an idea. Let's this is weird in a way, even for us. Let's hold the space for people. We'll ask the question. Let's hold the space for them for maybe 3 minutes while you are watching this. Do the exercise, and we'll try and hold the space for you. All you want to know is what's the content of the most important message that I can know and understand right now. That doesn't, there's no urgency to it, but it means in the here and the now. All right. I've got my little chess clock working here. Let's give
And
you
so,
3 minutes.
and so one of the rarest things on the internet, you're now going to have 3 minutes of nothing.
Well, you're going to have 3 minutes of silent support starting
Right.
now. All right. Now, you may have gone into a mildly altered state. If so, bring yourself back to the present. Try and remember anything that happened, including stuff that happened at the periphery that might seem extraneous, because that might turn out to be important. Obviously, Dirk and I have no way of knowing whether you got anything out of this. If you did and you would like to share it, email me at muddytracks@earthlink.net. I'll share it with Dirk and we'll see where we go with it.
Cool.
It really is this easy. It really, if there's a motto of the firm, it's not that hard, but you have to be able to do it. All right. Well, let's hope for the best here, Doctor. I think we did all right.
Well, another interesting discussion. Kind of went a little different than I think either of us planned, but that's quite all right.
Well, as we mentioned before, it's of the moment, and how can the moment be wrong?
Indeed.
That's a good alibi for us anyway, right?
Yeah. And who knows where we'll go next time. So we'll see you then.
Okay.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.